else that I talk with couples about is using I instead of you. I get frustrated when you did that, when you said that, instead of you frustrate me, you irritate me. It's going to put the other person on the defensive. So use I instead of you. It's also taking ownership when you use I. You is not a way you're blaming the other person. You need to. Words that people use all the time. Couples. You need to do this. You should do that. A lot of the couples that I see blame, justify, and defend. They're stuck in blame, justifications, and defensiveness. And that just keeps them going in circles. Have you ever heard the spelling of blame? Be lame. If you want to be lame, you will remain stuck. You get nowhere with blame. You get nowhere with defensiveness and justification. And that's what I see all the time with couples. So part of my job is just helping them take ownership, take responsibility. Because it's never all one person's fault in my practice when I work with couples. It's never all one person's fault, ever. Whoops. All right, the nonverbal communication. Oh my gosh. 93% of communication is nonverbal. That's why texting sucks. It really does. Emails, terrible. 93% is nonverbal. What is that? It's tone of voice, it's facial expression, it's body language, it's eye contact. All nonverbals. So be aware of your nonverbal communication, because someone can be controlling or aggressive in their nonverbals. And sometimes their nonverbal does not match with their verbal. Are you annoyed with me? I'm fine. Really? I'm confused. Work with me here. Work with me. So sometimes you need clarification, because sometimes there's an incongruency between the verbal and the nonverbal. Repetition. Sometimes people think if I say it enough times, the other person is going to receive it. Wrong. I tell people, say it and leave it. Say it and let it go. Repetition doesn't work. It just irritates the other person. So if you were to say, it really frustrates me when you leave your wet towel on the floor. How many times are you going to say that? How many times are you going to say that? You know, with kids, time for dinner. Time for dinner. Time for dinner. How many times are you going to call them for dinner? Call them once. If they don't show, call them a second time. If they don't show, have a consequence. Tell them ahead of time. If you don't come after the second time, there's a consequence. No dessert tonight. Or no TV tonight. Whatever. Something short and sweet. But a lot of people they'll just continue to escalate their voice, and they'll continue to repeat the same thing over and over and think that's going to get the result they want. It doesn't work. Obviously, people who are controlling have a hard time delegating and trusting others. Are there people in this room that have a hard time letting their partner or their significant other drive? Like sitting in the passenger seat. Can you sit in the passenger seat or not? Or if you sit in the passenger seat, you can't sit there without saying stuff. Can you sit there and keep your mouth shut? Is that hard to do for you? Then you're a control freak. So a lot of people have a hard time even letting the other person drive. try sitting in the passenger seat and keeping your mouth shut. Just give it a shot. See how that works for you.
Does that work when you're trying to teach your teenager to drive?
Yeah. Yeah. Hard to do, isn't it? All right, so worry. Now, I don't have a lot of time left, but I want you to write down quickly. Write down the things you worry about. Just write it on a piece of paper. Write down some of the things you worry about. Just take a minute or two. Because worry is so consuming, it's so overwhelming, and it's so absorbing. And worry is kind of like obsessing, dwelling, ruminating about stuff. A lot of people who worry about worst case, as I've said, and they what if themselves to death. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if, what if, what if? What if is based on the future. I tell them, replace what if with what is. What is today. What is today. Instead of what if. What if tomorrow this happens, or next week, or next month. Replace what if with what is. Sometimes you can replace what if with so what. Sometimes you can say so what. In the big scheme of things, it's really not that important. I also encourage people to replace worry with concern. Because concern doesn't have as much emotion tied into it as worry. And then I think the last one on that slide was fear.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what fear is. The acronym for fear. False evidence appearing real. Most of our fears are false evidence appearing real. Yet we're consumed by it. I'll give you an analogy, a car analogy. You're sitting in the driver's seat of your car. You have the rear view mirror. No one's sitting next to you, okay? You have the rear view mirror. And the rear view mirror allows you to look at what's behind you. That represents the past. Then you have the windshield, which is huge in comparison to the rear view mirror. But the windshield only allows you to look at what's directly in front of you. You can't see a mile down the road. The windshield is the present. A mile down the road is the future. Now, people who live in the rearview mirror, they live with regret, guilt, resentment. People who live in the future, they live with fear and worry and anxiety. I ask people, what percentage of your time do you live in the rearview mirror versus a mile down the road? Here's the healthy percentages. 10% in the rearview mirror, 20% a mile down the road, 70 on the windshield, 70 on today. So many of us are not focused on today. We're in the past or we're in the future. The past is history. The future, a mystery. The present, a gift. Focus on today. I love the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I have this picture in my office of downtown Miami from the late 80s. My wife and I lived in Miami before we moved up to Melbourne. So there's this picture of the skyline of Miami, and I'll ask a couple, when they come in, what do you see in the picture? It's kind of like ink blots, you know? What do you see in the picture? 9 times out of 10, they see something different. Often, the man sees the tallest building. Why? It's a phallic symbol. No, that's not all of it. You know, men are concrete and tangible, so they see the concrete. The women often see there's a reflection in the water. Women are more abstract in their thinking. Men are left brain, women are right brain. I'm overgeneralizing, of course, but that's why they see something different. So my question is, which one of you is right?
The women.
Oh.
Let's talk after the session. Are you in a relationship? All right. So you have to decide. You want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Because here's the overachiever. He wants all of it. So it's okay to see something different, but it's the ability to appreciate and respect your differences. As a man, as a woman, differences in personalities, differences in perspective. Because when you change the way you look at things, things change the way they look. When you change the way you look at things, things change the way they look. All right, remember in the beginning I talked about my prized possession, the car. I realized over several years, it took me a while, I'm a slow learner, that things and possessions are not as important as people. I was all about success. I was all about doing well, having a nice lifestyle, and having nice things. I realized that they can go away in a heartbeat. My perspective changed. I realized the importance and the value in people, in relationships, the people you love, the people you care about, your significant other, your children, your family, your friends. People matter way more than things. In my practice, I see people who have a lot of things and are freaking miserable because it's not about the material possessions. And I've switched from focusing on success to focusing on significance. So significance is I want to have a positive impact on people's lives. Whether it be in my practice, whether it be in my community, whether it be in my family, with my children, I want to have significance in people's lives instead of being fixated on success. So I'm telling you, control is highly, highly overrated. Let me close with the call to action. First thing is, take ownership, take responsibility. Recognize that the only one you can change is you. Change starts with you. Worry time. If you are a big worrier, why don't you set aside 5 to 10 minutes a day to worry your head off? Just have at it. So what you do is you gather your worries. As the day progresses, you gather your worries. You write them down on a piece of paper or in your phone. And at the end of the day, you get those worries out. You take 10 minutes and you make 2 columns. Control, no control. And you decide which column does that worry belong to. The no control list is going to be a lot longer. The control list is easy. You can problem solve those. It's the no control list. What are you going to do with that list? If you have a faith, maybe you give it to God. Maybe you burn the list. Maybe you shred the list. But you got to let it go. You got to let it go. And the last call to action is to practice. Practice once a day letting go of control. Letting someone else decide where you go for dinner. Letting someone else drive the car. Because it's not all about control. Control is truly an illusion. Thank you. I do have books, both the relationship book and a workbook that will sell at the end, but I want to have some time for questions and answers. So, any questions? Yes?
So when people have experienced trauma or PTSD, what would be a good way for them to let go of control, try external control and get more control of themselves?
Sure. So, of course, it depends on the trauma, what it is, but a lot of times it might be, one way of letting go is to confront the trauma, and that might be, so let's just say someone was traumatized because they were attacked, physically attacked, and maybe they know the attacker. So one way might be to confront the attacker, not literally, but in a therapy session. A lot of times I will have people actually write a letter to that person who maybe abused them or who attacked them, to write a letter to that person and to be able to talk about all that emotional pain, because there's a lot of pain in trauma. There's a lot of pain. And sometimes it helps to be able to confront it, but also to be able to try to close it. So they would write a letter, they would bring the letter in, and I would have a chair, and I'd have them read the letter to that person as if they were sitting in the chair. And they might talk about the pain, they might talk about the situation, and if they can, and sometimes they can't, if they can forgive that person, not forget, and forgive is not condone, it's none of that. Forgive is release. That's ultimately what you want to do, is you want to release. So they would read the letter out loud in the session, and then I would move to that chair, and I would play that person. Because what people need is closure. You've heard the expression, time heals all wounds? It's crap. Time doesn't heal all wounds. You've got to confront the wounds in order to heal. You have to go through it to get through it. So that's one way. There's a new technique that's been around a while. It's called EMDR. It's another way that sometimes people deal with trauma. Mindfulness is another one. There are different ways. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, but I really like the letter writing because it's very powerful. It's very powerful. I make sure I have plenty of tissues for that session because there's so much emotion that comes out in that visit. And the other thing to say is, it's a process. It's not something that, oh, one session and boom, it's gone. Of course not. Of course not. Anytime you go through trauma or grief, it takes a while to heal. But I believe it requires you to confront the trauma. Yes?
Seems like people are more stressed out today than ever.